All right, welcome back. This is WUB Wake Up Belize Morning Vibes, and we have our guest direct from Grenada. She is Kay Simon, and she is a barrister qualified in London, passed the bar in London. She is in the Attorney General's office in Grenada. She's also Belize's representative in Grenada, and yes, I'm looking at her now. And if you don't mind me saying, that one gal from Kinnell side. So
you got that.
we are so proud of you. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Nuri.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here. And in full disclosure, Nuri is my cousin. If other cousins are listening in, at least for this morning, he's my favorite cousin.
Oh man! All right, good. Well, I probably can't.
But my pleasure to be here.
I have to put some sun in your mouth with all the nice things you're saying there. But listen, we are already crunched in time. You had to be in court this morning, and that's the reason why you had to limit your time with us. But let's start with you being in the Attorney General's office, and what are your duties in that area?
Well, I count myself as rather lucky to be there. Many people say that when you work in public service, that's kind of a unrewarding job. But in my case, some of you may not know, but I've always been involved in public service, even though I work primarily in the private service. And it's always been my ambition to do so. Some persons have said, well, why don't you do politics in Belize? I said I wouldn't do it there or anywhere else. That's for somebody else. But I do believe that by serving the public and serving the public well, either through social outlets or in this instance here, through the Attorney General's chambers, where all matters of the government, therefore all matters of the people are dealt with, I believe I can do so. I would have loved to do so in Belize. However, I'm here living in Grenada, and we are part of the same CARICOM group, so I do serve my Caribbean community. I must say, though, to your direct question, what am I doing there? I've completed my law degree. I also did a master's in legislative drafting because of my interest in public policy. And of course, I decided why not do the litigation also? As our dear late friend BQ used to say, go for the whole shebang, and that's what I did. And I am fortunate to be here at the Attorney General's chambers in Grenada, working across the board. So that's what I'm doing there.
Very good, very good. Well, I want to jump into looking at, well, before I go into looking at COVID, when we think about Grenada, clearly what comes up in the last 25 years is Maurice Bishop, and the only insurrection in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean specifically, and his New Jewel movement, in fact, taking over Grenada, and in fact, attempting to introduce certain radical measures of governance. And unfortunately, he was murdered by his own colleagues. That's another story. But certainly the internal problems that the New Jewel movement experienced gave the United States, during the time of Ronald Reagan, the opportunity to go in and to, in fact, invade Grenada. Now, I'm asking that question in the context of what has happened to Grenada since that time, and are Grenadians connected in any way to that experience of Grenada under Maurice Bishop?
Oh, they definitely are. I'll take that two parts. You mentioned the revolution and the implosion of that revolution, and that's part of every Grenadian living here. There are two schools of thought as to the intervention by the U.S. government. You notice I said intervention. Some people call it invasion, as you referred to it. And here within the country, there's still those two different parts. However, I would say after living here for 20 years, the prevailing feeling is that it was an intervention which saved Grenada. As a matter of fact, on the 25th of October each year, the country has a national holiday celebrated as Grenada Thanksgiving Day, because the country and the people of Grenada do believe that it was indeed a good thing that the intervention happened. It saved in their eyes the country, it saved democracy, and Grenada is functioning just fine. As I said, I've been living here for 20 years, and as you and anyone else who knows me know that I only live where I want to live. And at this point, I think I rather like being here. In terms of impact on the population, you had asked me here about COVID, and one of the institutions which was set up during the Maurice Bishop revolutionary government was the National Insurance Scheme, similar to our Social Security scheme in Belize. And that, in fact, here in COVID, has provided the government with the facility with which they were able to underpin part of their stimulus package in terms of a safety net for persons who were adversely affected by the loss of jobs, the furlough from jobs, especially those people, the fisher folk, those in the tourism industries, the taxi drivers, all of whom had no income since the country went into lockdown for a long time, and the airports, the international borders have been closed. So those people have been out of business with not much income. In fact, many of them no income coming in. And there it is. They have the National Insurance Scheme, NIS as it's commonly referred to here, which is providing the funds for the government to offer only for the second time in its history unemployment payments to those persons who have lost income or whose income have been reduced due to the impact of COVID. And as I said, only the second time. The first time was after the Hurricane Ivan of 2004. So you see, there are some institutions which were established during that period which are still having positive effect on and in Grenada.
Well, that's very interesting, and in fact, you've gone into my third question in terms of the impact and how people have responded to COVID, and especially the economic aspect of it. But I still want to go back and ask another part of that question about Maurice Bishop. It sounds as if you are saying that the day of celebration is the day that looks at the intervention from the Americans being a saving and a reason for celebrating. Are there any days in the calendar year that in any way acknowledge what the revolution was attempting to do? Is Maurice Bishop a hero?
He is a hero in just about in the minds of every Grenadian. And there, the day of the actual revolution, when it started, is actually noted. There are replays of audios which were available from the time of the revolution. However, the only actual public holiday is in celebration of the intervention by the Americans to restore democracy. Because you must understand that when the government under the revolution, the revolutionary government imploded, and I say implode because it was one faction within it that that rebelled against the other. It was in-house fighting, and they destroyed each other. That was the opening for the American intervention. You know, they came in the first instance to repatriate Americans who were here at the medical school at the time, now St. George's University, and also to save Grenadians who were at that time in a really bad way. But I would leave you to speak with a Grenadian who, one, would have experienced it, and two, would have been here at the time, and three, as a Grenadian, would be able to give you exactly what they think about it.
All right.
At the document, speaking with people around here, they consider, the majority that is, consider the intervention and a saving action, which is why, regardless of which government, which administration is in government, there has never been a question of questioning the fact that October 25th, the day of the invasion, the day of the intervention, however a Grenadian choose to look at it, it's a good thing to be celebrated, and there are ceremonies to mark the day each year.
That in itself tells me that there's a lot that we need to learn about that period of history. But the conversation this morning is not about the history of Grenada. It's really an overview of what is happening in Grenada now. You were talking about the national insurance scheme and how it has played an important role in addressing the fact that the impact of the pandemic has created a very difficult economic situation for Grenadians. And in fact, the government had access to funds, which are the people's money, to be able to respond to the issue of people being able to have food on their table and an income enough for them to be able to survive. With the fact that tourism is an important part of the Grenadian economy, and the fact that tourism, like the entire region, is being affected by the drop in tourism dollars, are there other alternatives that the government is looking at to bring Grenadians into some sort of economic balance, rather than just the welfare program of supplying needed funds drawing from their national insurance scheme?
Let's start with that. That is just one part of what the government is doing. The Grenadian government, and please understand that I do not speak for the Grenadian government here.
Of course.
I am here simply as K. Simon, resident, worker, business person here in Grenada, speaking as Belize's representative, talking to Belize about the experience here. But it would be not true to say that I'm not aware of some of the things that are happening here. And I did speak with the Government Information Service about some of the things that were happening after Nuri called me about this matter. But I can tell you that, again, that the NIS is just one portion of it. Initially, Grenada, as did most other countries, went into lockdown in March. And they did that because, as we know, there are no fixes so far for COVID-19. So as I believe it was Sandra Cowie I heard on Love FM one night telling people why there should be social distancing. And I wish I could explain it the way she did, but I will just put it like this. In absence of a cure, social distancing is not about depriving you of your friends and your activities. It's because the only fix, it is about depriving the virus of moving on to another host. So if it cannot jump from you, the host, to somebody else, it will, like everything else, die its natural course. So until we have a fix, most governments went into lockdown. So the airports, and in our case, I say the airports, primarily because we're an island and people can't drive in, so you either sail in or you fly in. And so the borders were closed. Initially, between parishes, between the islands, because it's a tri-island state, that was also closed, so as to contain whatever possible spread there would be through community spread. We have had positive cases here, and the positive news for us is that we have not had any deaths because the government was very proactive. We had the test place, we had the ventilators, we had all that was required. The hospital was set up in such a way as to treat with those who got infected, so that there was no risk to them. Well, there was no risk to those who would be in contact with them, and there was proper tracing. So we were able to identify those who were affected, trace their contacts, isolate and quarantine where required. Now, separate and apart from that, the government, Prime Minister Keith Mitchell and his cabinet, they were really proactive by getting an economic stimulus package launched within, I believe it was about 2 or 3 weeks. In fact, less than that, I believe. They were one of the first to launch it, and it was a 15 pound, which stated exactly how they were going to support those who obviously would be affected. So there's also, separate and apart from the unemployment as well, or welfare as you called it just now, there are also economic stimulation packages that's being offered through the government, the Grenada Development Bank. Normally, Belize have a similar bank there which deals with small businesses through the Belize Investment Group. And here what they did was, now as the regulations are, and the lockdown and the different restrictions are being eased and businesses are coming back on stream, they're also offering to those persons who have small businesses, and as you mentioned, tourism is not going to come back on stream for a while. They're looking to repurpose their businesses as much as possible and have them do stimulus and offering small loans through them, up to 10,000 unsecured, and increasing, that's an increase from what you could have had before unsecured, and 40,000 secured. Once it comes on stream, separate and apart from some funds that you would have gotten monthly, for example, the taxi drivers who had they couldn't do the public transport, they couldn't do the tourism transport. So those taxi drivers had zero income as of the time the country was locked down. Now they have the monthly income that they were getting because they were registered. And two, now when they begin to operate again, they have access to small microfinancing. So I think the government has set that up well. Obviously, the country will need more than these microfinancing to get it going, but I am sure that this government, like every other government in the world, would be working with World Bank and other international institutions to get them up and ready. The good thing is Grenada also had, as was noted in the last budget presentation, they were one of the lucky ones that, because of a real downturn that they had before and the package they had put together, they had reserves. So Grenada is in fairly good shape, but we don't know what COVID is going to do on the long term, but at least at this point, it has a cushion.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Prime Minister Mitchell's overall plan to address the problem in Grenada, and I appreciate your sending me that when it was published. You speak about the assistance that would be coming to those affected financially, and it reminds me of something I read yesterday of the BTIA making an approach to our local development agency, which is called the DFC, as you know, to ask for a considerable amount of support through loans with low interest rates and long-term arrangements. I think they asked for 12 months without paying back the loan, with the idea of being able to use a stimulus. Since government is not able to provide that stimulus, they're looking for other means and other ways of being able to do that. And I was able to see that in the plan of Prime Minister Mitchell. Going forward, however, you've mentioned that while they greatly depend on tourism, it doesn't appear as if they are simply waiting for the return of the tourist dollars, but they're looking for, as you call it, repurposing businesses to ensure that they will be able to continue, at least to stay above water before tourism kicks back in, which may not be in the immediate future. Can you elaborate a little bit on that aspect?
Well, Nuri, I think businesses, just like individuals and just the human being itself, you cannot sit and wait for someone to do something for you. You assess and you figure out what the reality is and what you need to do. Can you hold? Are you in a position that you can hold for a long time, or do you have to repurpose what you're about? You know that I'm a big fan of microfinancing. In fact, that is how I began my professional career. I was at St. John's Credit Union for 10 years. And we did many microfinancing projects through that, some which were stimulated. For example, when Belize City, for example, went into, did the national sewage system, the credit unions throughout Belize provided small, low-cost loans to people to be able to retrofit their houses, to be able to tap into that system and to become compliant with the new rules. So this is nothing new, and this is things that people will need to look at. I am always of the mind that while you may feel sorry for yourself for a little bit, and while you may call yourself a victim for a little bit, fine, do that, own that, but then what are you going to do about it? So likewise, I believe the authorities are going to consolidate in Belize. If they have not done so, I cannot speak for them. I can only speak for what's happening here in Grenada in terms of the government, the Chamber of Commerce, the central bank, and everybody working together, because the bottom line is each of those entities, their purpose is to serve, whether for profit or not, to serve the interests of the public. And they cannot do that haphazardly in a situation like this, because this COVID came and it affected everyone, not just here in our small island state, or here or there in Belize, a dot in Central America, but worldwide. And everybody will likewise come out trying to get what would be in their own country's best interest. So it is, I believe, in fact, whether I believe or not, it is the fact that each country will have to come together and have a national plan how to address it, or else there will be chaos. Because people need to have income, they need to have jobs, they need to have a purpose. Then schools, what's happening with schools? What's happening with CXC? What's happening with CAPE, etc.? Those are regional decisions, and the families and the communities will need to figure out how they're going to have their children prepared for that. We do know that there are some marginalized families who do not have the multiple laptops, the multiple smartphones, etc., to allow their children to keep up. But then that's where government and other social groups, can step in. I know the Rotary International has stepped up. I've seen posts from the Rotary Club of Grenada. I know our club here, the Rotary Club of Belize. I know our club here, the Rotary Club of Grenada. We have given food hampers to persons who have a little less than they had before. And we've also worked with two of the telephone companies here to provide computers, phones to students who were not able to afford such devices on their own. So there are many things to be done, but I think in this instance, while people want to blame or to throw shade, as the popular term is now, on governments and institutions, the best thing is to engage them and see how together they can work to make sure that the community does not collapse under COVID. COVID is like anything else. It comes, it is deadly, but we survive, we move on. At the beginning of this, I was told one of my paternal great-grandmothers was lost to the flu of 1918, 1919. I didn't know that. But what? Our family healed, our family is here. Just like that, we will survive this.
Interesting connection there. Before I go on to the next question, I'm remiss in not asking the population of Grenada how many persons were affected by the COVID, and you've already stated you have had no deaths. So could you give us that stat before we go on?
Okay, I believe we're just over 20 at this point. It is on our government information site, which is you can access by Facebook or simply going to grenada.gov. And it has exactly how many persons were infected, and what's the status of their recovery. But I can confirm that we have not lost any lives to COVID so far, and I hope that remains the same. We have repatriated quite a few people, and that has in fact bumped the numbers up. And but those were isolated because they were immediately quarantined, and So there is not new community spread, and we hope that that will continue to be that way, in that we don't have community spread. However, Grenada, like Belize and every other country in the world, is eventually going to open its border. I think what we have going for us, and I think what we can sell, given the fact that tourism is huge for both Belize and Grenada, is that we in the Caribbean, I speak for many Caribbean countries when I say this, because I'm part of a group from Jamaica to Guyana, which we chat pretty much every day with what's going on with these things. And the Caribbean community can actually be held up as an example of how to treat with COVID, with how to treat with your people, with how to keep them motivated and restart when the border is open. We have we have the tests in place, so we can test. We have refitted the institutions, the physical places, to make sure that when business return as normal, the social distancing and all the protocols which have been established will be possible. Because it's one thing to say that you want to do something, it's another thing to actually do it, and another also to be able to do it. And so the things are being put in place to make it happen. For example, court. I apologize to your audience for waiting this morning, but court is a very jealous thing. I had to go there first. And where did I sit in court? Right here where I'm sitting with you. Court was held by Zoom because protocols have been put in place, directions and practice directions have been issued, which makes it where the judge is, the court is. And we carried on business just as if we were there in a much safer way, because we weren't breathing on each other. You know what I mean?
I could imagine. And the population of Grenada again?
Just over 108, between the 1,000, that is 108,000. It's a very small country, but it is a very proud country. And that speaks back to what you opened with about Maurice Bishop and the revolution, because Grenada, as one of my neighbors told me some time ago, when, just in business talk, etc., she was saying, these people don't realize Grenada had three revolutions. There was Fedon during the days of slavery. There was Mr. Gary, who was overthrown by Maurice Bishop and his crew, and then there was the People's Revolutionary Party under the Jewel movement. Point is, Grenadians are proud people that will not stand to be taken advantage of, and they're proud people who are very innovative, and they make things happen, and it will happen again after COVID. It's happening as we speak.
All right, I want you to, I love that spirit, because we've always considered that a Caribbean spirit. I read yesterday the message from Sir Hilary Beckles, where he, as you know, he's the Vice Chancellor of UWI, and he said just about that same thing in his message to the Caribbean, that the way in which we are looking at what's going on in the United States right now, in fact, that Caribbean people have always had that spirit of resistance and that spirit to fight and to stand up against injustice. And he pointed out men who stood up in America, and women too, who really came from the Caribbean, like Marcus Garvey, like Malcolm X, and others. But I want to take you back to the fact that you were a very vibrant youth activist when you were in Belize. And not think we forget those days of your protest and your revolutionary spirit. I want you to speak to youths in Belize who form the majority population of our country, who are faced with a number of challenges even before COVID, and now look at the future, which really rests with their ability to grapple and deal with these challenges moving forward. So as a former youth activist, very vibrant in your days, what would you say to the youths of Belize today?
I would say, I would just expand on what I just said. You can feel sorry for yourself, but you have to look for the opportunities, all right? You speak to me as a youth activist. It wasn't, it was just a function of being interested in what was happening in my community. I was not going to sit around and say, oh, look what the government doing to me, or look what the church doing to me, or look what the school doing to me. No, I wanted to see certain things, and my philosophy has always been, go and make it happen. If you don't, you know, I like what the Prime Minister of St. Martin, the Dutch part of St. Martin, the TEN rather than the TIN, she said when people were complaining after the lockdown for COVID that they didn't have food in their house. She said, if you don't have bread, eat biscuit. If you don't have biscuit, eat crackers. If you don't, eat whatever is in your pantry, and you make do with that until you get more. You know, people said, well, are you rushing the day that they were about to close down here? I said, no, I'm from Belize. I have rice and beans. I good. And we need to learn that you don't always have everything you want, but more often than not, you have what you need. And you also have to be mindful of those around you, all right? So you have rice and beans. Does your neighbor next to you have rice and beans? Or is it like when those times you were talking about, you can go over to the neighbor and say, may I have some of that rice and beans? Or do you have some sugar that I can have? You have to learn to share. You have to learn to also put the protections in place. I think about our neighborhood growing up there, in Canal Side, as you said. There was Miss Mavis. There was Miss Tucker, our teacher. There was Miss Val, Miss Young, Teacher Durla. All of these people looking out for us. Now look at that. Some of them were housewives, some of them were teachers, some of them were business persons, but they looked after each and every one of us growing up in that neighborhood. You can go into any one of those houses and get a plate of food and some advice. You better not screw up because you will hear about it. That is how community service begins, because you start to look after your home, you start to look after the neighbor, the neighbor, and you expand that out. That is how my community involvement began. Today, I'm a Rotarian. I joined Rotary when I lived in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands in the 90s. And people say, oh, well, you're doing these things because you're a Rotarian. I said, no, I was a Girl Guide in Belize. I grew up in my neighborhood and we help one another. You start with the little things. We forget some of the basic things, to just be kind, to just share. And institutionally, parents need to get involved. Parents need to know that their children are in school, that their children are doing their homework, that they're fed. Like I said, they do not have to have steak, but rice and beans, you got your protein and your carbs, you're good to go. All right? I remember one time visiting St. Lucia and stopping at the court to say hello to our immediate past Chief Justice Kenneth Benjamin. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I remember. And the reason I remember it is because he called me to the window and he said, look out there. He said, what time is it? Okay, I said 11. He said, why are those children on the street? He said, that's where it begins. People need to take care to make sure that their children do what they need to do. If I bang hooky, as we used to say growing up, by the time I get home, mommy would know. And you bet I would be in school the next day, probably with, with my butt burning, you know, but we have different rules today. Parents need to realize that even though they are their children's friends, first and foremost, they are their children's guardian, they're their children's parents, and they have a responsibility when they make that child to ensure that the child has the requirements to make them survive in life without them when they grow up. That's the least they can do, at least get them to school. School is free in Belize. Books, you get help. You can use books. I don't know what the policy is in terms of supplying books, but there's libraries, there are smartphone devices. The material can be had, and I'm not saying that everybody has, but the little bit that you have, you use that and you build on it. That's how community service begin. That's how activism begin. You begin with yourself and you expand that to your neighbor next to you and the child next to you. How many children have we adopted? You know, and I don't mean literally bringing them in your house to live, but just take responsibility to them. Keep an eye on them. When we walked through that gate to go to school, to go to guides, whatever, Miss Young looking out for us, Miss Mavis looking out for us. I say this to say it's as simple as that. Take care of the children in your neighborhood and let that circle expand, and that's how that's as best as I can say it.
All right, we're out of time. We're way beyond time. I've got more questions because I may expect to be talking to you much earlier, but we'll have to leave it there. I'll give you a final word. I don't know if you would like to also mention your concerns, as you said yesterday, of what's going on in the United States right now, since you did spend some time there, but I'll give you a final word.
I'm very concerned about that. I did read Sir Beckles' report yesterday. One thing he did forget to mention, which kind of, well, there's a direct link here. Malcolm X was a phone, well, in their days, it would have been a ship's sail away from Grenada. His mother is from La Digue in Grenada.
That's right.
He is a Grenadian.
That's right.
It turns out his daughter is an ambassador at large for Belize. Yes, and she and I have been in contact over the last few years because I am also a representative of Belize. She's been to my house, and we've had connection because of our Grenada, Belize, and also her mother worked with my late husband at Medgar Evers. So that was a really out of nowhere connection. That is a good connection.
Indeed.
But the Caribbean person in the U.S. has a different experience from the Black American in the U.S. And I say that having lived there, and maybe it's because of our background where we don't necessarily, well, we're not naturally submissive to others. You have to earn our trust. You have to earn the right to respect you. And so we look at this, and those of my friends and associates in the US look at it as, okay, what do we do about this, as opposed to look what they're doing to us. Look what we're doing to us is fine, because we have to know that there is victimization there. But like those persons who Professor Beckles mentioned, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, remember he was in Belize some years ago when I was home. Belize
Yes.
hosted all of those people from the Caribbean. They said it is not good enough to just be lynched. You must own your life. You must not partake in your dehumanization, and you must do all you can to preserve your right. Get out there and vote. The majority of people have the right to vote in the US. That's the first thing you can do, because you can complain all you want, but unless you change the structure and the policies, and the only way you can change those is by getting the persons of like mind in office to take up your cause. Other than that, we will be discussing this 50 years from here. But then again, you and I may not be around 50 years to discuss it. So let's do something now while we're here. Get out there and vote.
Well, I appreciate this, and we've been waiting a long time to get you on the air, and we appreciate, even though it was crunch time, we appreciate so much what you have said, Kay, and we hope that you will return to Belize. Maybe Grenada won't want you to leave, just like your husband didn't want you to leave. I'm sure the rest of Grenadians won't want you to leave, but we also would love to have you back home, participating as you have. It's not just the quality of your educational achievement, but it's that spirit that you have, and I'm blessed that I knew you long before your educational qualifications, and you are the same Kay Simon, and I really, really thank God to be in your life, and wish you nothing but the best for yourself going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And it would be remiss of me not to say before I leave, the government of Belize has honored me with the task of representing Belize here in Grenada. And it's been a wonderful relationship. I now see, not by any means of mine, but I'm proud to now see we have ice cream from Belize on the shelves here. I know we're currently negotiating sugar and other stuff like that. It's a wonderful relationship. There's great trust between the two countries. Prime Minister Mitchell is a friend of Belize, and Prime Minister Barrow is a friend of Grenada. It's a great relationship, and we have had many visits from Foreign Minister Elrington. He is well loved and respected here in Grenada, and not just in Grenada, I must say. When you say Elrington, throughout the Caribbean, everybody's like, oh yeah, Sedi, he's so cool. And whenever Belizeans come here to represent Belize, as in Member of Parliament Courtney once came here to speak at the Bar Association. I am so proud, so proud whenever Belize comes to come here to Grenada, Belizeans come here, because they do so well, and it is easy to do because Belize is, like it says, a jewel.
Indeed.
And I was laughing before I came on. I saw a commercial of a child being called to dinner. I wish it was me.
Indeed. Well, sis, we thank you for being here. And just as a last note, it seems as though we bite up one another in Belize, but every time we go outside, we are part of that jewel. So I'm glad you make that very clear. Take good care.
And I hope we never forget that.
Yes.
You know, we should quarrel. We should quarrel during campaign, go vote, and then go to building Belize.
Yes.
Because that is what it is all about.
Yeah.
Look at the successful countries throughout the world. They decide that regardless of party, we are our country first. So let us not fall into that trap of eating each other.
Thank you very much, Kay Simon, and all the best to you. And God
Thank
bless.
you, Nuri.
All
My
right.
pleasure.
All right. We've got only time enough to end our program.